Welcome to the Scoop World Order. We have got a special guest. We're going to get right to it. We have the great Urban Meyer. Appreciate you guys supporting the channel. If you could like this episode, that would be huge. But we'll get right to him because he is a busy man and he's on the road. Coach Meyer, I know that you are on the road. I appreciate you taking some time with us today. How are you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. The Meyer family has grown, 4 grandkids. All 3 kids are married now. It's the first time that many Meyers were all together for Thanksgiving. So it's tremendous. We're very blessed.
That's fantastic. I remember like when Nate was a seventh grader and I coached him in the flag football thing at the Ohio State camp, and obviously Gigi and Nikki I've known for a long time. Shells, of course. Fantastic family. Very glad you had a great Thanksgiving. I want to get into it because I know the time is limited. I was talking last night on my show that I think that you potentially are the greatest rivalry college football coach of all time, starting, obviously Utah, BYU, Florida. At Florida, you had two rivals. You had Florida State and Georgia, which is like two monsters on the schedule. And then obviously 7-0 at Ohio State. What is the key to getting a team kind of gassed up and ready to go for a rival, especially when it's, obviously Michigan, you got one, Florida, you had two, but your record was, sterling against those teams. What is the secret to getting a team ready to go in a game like the Ohio State Michigan game?
Well, the Ohio State, the Wolverine game is just so unique because you got one, it's one target. Is challenging. Actually, at Florida, we had 3. You had Tennessee as well.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
really a challenge because, in Ohio State, you had one coach, Tim Hinton, all year long. Our recruiting staff, we knew who they recruited. We educated because, we expanded our footprint and we started recruiting kids from Texas, Florida, et cetera. And we would play at least once a week in the off season, play the documentary. I make sure our coaches, everybody understood the rivalry, educated on them. I would always say, how do you respect the man you work so hard to beat him? They don't talk about it. And so we just worked really hard. But, and I grew up in the 10-year war. I was in Sarasota about 5-6 days ago. We had some friends over and we sat and watched a documentary on the rivalry. And everybody's looking at me like, why are you watching this? I'm like, why are we not watching it? What's the problem here? You study it, you learn it, you appreciate it, you respect it, and you work your off to win that game. So I'm not sure there's a secret. The secret's great players and great assistant coaches, which we
Mhm.
had.
Yeah, and again, I thought you did as good of a job as anyone is embracing the rivalry. Like we got rid of the blue pens. Some of the guys when they first got there in 12, they used blue pens, and I said we don't use blue pens here. So you threw those all away. We did the little maize and blue periods. We made the guys do up downs for like 10 straight minutes and gas them out to hate Michigan. Um, but as you're getting ready for this week, if you're in Ryan's shoes, which you have been, what is your mentality on Friday? I always talk about like how unique it was on Friday, how you do the best Fridays in football, how it was a little bit more relaxed. But then on Saturday, it was like Vietnam, it was like Full Metal Jacket, it was go. I mean, it was real. And I used to tell people, I was like, yeah, that's when that sun comes up Saturday, man, it's war. Talk a little bit about like what your Friday prep would be like and then rolling into Saturday.
Yeah, this is so unique because the week is kind of chopped up. On Sunday, you have the best damn band in the land comes in, and all the players do the script Ohio, and a captain leads the band from the director chair. And then on Thursday, you have the senior tackle. Um, and then Thanksgiving, you want to, it's really important that we got our kids, our players, and coaches out of there. You're exhausted. I remember Thanksgiving dinner is really for as long as my kids can remember. There's always, because you had Bowling Green, Utah, you had Utah versus BYU, Florida State, and then obviously the rivalry game. And you're exhausted, but you get up Friday, best Fridays of football, and that was, you work hard, but you wanted them. The most important thing I learned from Sonny Lubick at Colorado State was Friday they got to sleep. You don't want to get them all riled up on Friday. So that's why we call it Best Fridays. And then Saturday is Full Metal Jacket. You wake up and it's time to go. Um, and especially the bus ride, you remember that darn thing, that bus ride up to Ann Arbor. It's just terrible. You're driving but it's also time to, really focus on your assignments as a coach, your coaching responsibility. And then when you get up to Ann Arbor, it's, you get to the hotel, relax the best you can. And then when that bell rings on Saturday, the other thing I thought about this too, Kurt.
Hmm.
One of the best things we didn't do it every year, but a lot of times we took the pads off on rivalry week because I wanted, and we made a huge deal out of that. I wanted your body feeling like it was game one. And that was, because the wear and tear, especially on linemen and running backs and linebackers, the reality is you're beat up by this time of year. And I wanted them to sink into the Wolverines, man. I wanted the next thing you hit was going to be wearing maize and blue. And the players loved that.
Yeah, I think that's something that people don't realize. Like as you get later in the season, you got to keep the intensity turned up, but you got to get these guys to the game too, because some of these guys, I mean, with the way the seasons are getting longer, that's going to become more prevalent. I think. Your thoughts on the Michigan game as the playoffs expand, because that's going to be something that's going to be interesting. If they can stay where they are, assuming, I mean, I don't know where they're going to be next year, given all the rumors of what's going on with Jim Harbaugh, but you know talk about the expanding playoffs and the potential of a rematch against Michigan. Because frankly, I would hate that. I'm sure you would too. But what are your thoughts on the the future of the game with the expansion of the playoffs?
Well, every decision right now made in college athletics are for money
Yep.
and really the fan experience, which you can't argue. I mean, you can sit back and criticize and all that. It's the reason why it's other than the NFL, it's the most watched sporting events. And so the reality is that there's a chance Ohio State can play the Wolverines 2 or 3 times in a year. Can you imagine? I can't even imagine that.
It's
I mean,
terrible.
the wear and tear that puts on you. But the one thing I don't think will ever happen, Kirk, and is move the game. You know,
Mhm.
the game's got to stay on Thanksgiving weekend. But the reality is they get away with divisions. And if the top two teams play every year in a Big Ten championship game, you can expect rematches. And as a player and as a coach, that's miserable. As a fan and as TV audiences, it's incredible. And that's who wins.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's certain teams that like once you beat them, you just want to not see them again for a year, just because you know how hard it is. It'd be like if you would have beaten like Alabama in '08 in the SEC championship, then you had to play them again like in the playoffs. You're like, we just killed King Kong, and now we got to go kill him again. And again, like when Michigan's really good and you beat them, it's nice to not have to play them again for another year. I mean, I know you know that. I want to talk a little bit about the press conferences this year between. I mean, obviously Jim Harbaugh's not going to be on the sideline. Ryan Day, there's a palpable dislike, which again in coaching, there's a lot of coaches that don't like each other. There's a lot that do like each other. Did you function better as a head coach when you had kind of that edge where you knew that you really didn't like the guy that was on the other sideline? Because I know you've got a ton of allies. Like Chip Kelly is one of your really good friends. And you've got some guys that Kyle Whittingham. If you're coaching against him, like I don't think you would. Obviously, you want to beat him, but I don't think you like outright hate him. Like that's palpable between Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh. Did you function better when you didn't like the coach on the opposing sideline?
I never really. Of course, you do. Hatred is such a great motivator, and
Yeah.
this is unprecedented. What's going on in this? I can't wait for the Netflix on this one.
Yeah.
The storylines behind this about whether it's true or not about all this the cheating and the stealing signs or whatever and it's really not stealing signs. That's what you got to get out of your mind. It's the scouting that went ahead and then recruiting during COVID. So there's so many things. You're like, wait a minute. At first, I didn't believe any of it because I thought the media had it wrong. Because they get things wrong a lot. But when you fire a linebacker coach and Harbaugh doesn't fight the suspension, there's got to be some truth to all this stuff. So I'm imagining Ryan Day and his staff feel like they've been taken, and then Jim Harbaugh, I don't. There's all insinuation about Ryan. So this is unprecedented. I've never been in a situation like this. But to answer your question, if there's a lot of distaste and hatred to the opposition, that's always hatred's an incredible motivator.
Oh. I always when I think about you with that, I think about the '07 Georgia game and then what you did to them the next year. When they did the
Oh
little
yeah, that
dance
was
in the
hatred
middle of the
now.
field. That was not like, hey, I'll see it midfield. I mean, that was we're gonna score and we're gonna keep scoring and we're gonna call timeout and give Emmanuel Moody a couple carries and because I loved it like that's my guy right there because that's what I'm talking about because I never could function on a football field liking anybody. I had to hate everybody even if it was manufactured because I wasn't that guy. I always had to be kind of turned up a little bit. Uh, the game on Saturday, there's some interesting matchups. I think that the lines are kind of interesting. The Ohio State offensive line versus Michigan's defensive front is going to be obviously a war. What are some of the key matchups that you want to look at? I know you like in warmups to see what the trenches look like. The skill guys, obviously, with Marvin versus their top corner. What are some key matchups for tomorrow's game that you're really excited to see, especially early in the game?
Yeah, I'm really interested about the Wolverine offensive line and against the Buckeye defense line. Both strengths for each team. But I was at the Penn State game, and the right tackle really struggled in pass pro.
Mm-hmm.
JJ got smacked. Two of the play 2 and play 6 in that game. I'm going to do something on Big Noon Kickoff about that. I wonder if that's one of the reasons they're not throwing the ball very much. I think JJ got dinged a little bit too. So they run the ball very well, but I'm curious about how because there's no chance that the Wolverines can just line up and do what they did. Even against Penn State, they ran the ball 32 straight times, but it's not like they ran for a lot of yards. They punted 3 times. They only scored 10 points in the second half. And a lot of the reason they did that is because Penn State offense was so inept. So I think that's going to be a big, they got 2. I love the running back. Corum and Edwards are really good players. But I'm curious to see how the O-line does against, the best D-line they faced all year. The other matchup is going to be obviously the best player in the game. Marvin against the Wolverines got a really good secondary. They have a high draft pick at corner. I imagine I'm curious to see the first few plays if they match him up with Marvin Harrison Jr. I believe it's number 2. Really, really good player. So those are the 2 matchups. There's so many, but those are the 2 I want to see early in the game.
Do you think as the game gets closer, it's interesting that you're not going to see Jim Harbaugh tomorrow. He's suspended, and it's going to be Sharon Moore. Does that amplify the pressure on Ryan Day, given the fact that you're not facing the normal head coach? Like if you were coaching against a guy who's like the interim head coach in the game, again, like for me, I'd be like, well, that's great because he's not used to being the lead, the head duck, as you like to say. Does that amplify the pressure on Ryan? I mean, obviously there's incredible pressure to win the Michigan game, but when they take away their head coach and they've got a guy who's, he's got to be the offensive line coach, he's got to be the offensive play caller, and he also now has to be the head coach. You know how hard it is to be any of those 3, but then you have to be all 3 on game day. Does that amp it up on Ryan a little bit?
Well, first let's talk about Sharon Moore. I mean, the hardest position to coach is O-line.
Yep.
The hardest thing to do on game day is call plays. And then you're also the game manager. That means you got to make the decisions. And there's a reason why, offensive line coaches normally aren't coordinators because their job's too hard. There's another reason why very few coordinators are head coaches because that's too hard to do. So he's a very good coach. He's back-to-back years. They won the Joe Moore Award as the best line. But he's also gotten less creative in the last 2 games. And I wonder if that's why. The question about Ryan Day and the pressure, is it amplified? Sure, but, how do you amplify something more that's already unbearable?
Yeah.
The pressure, it ate me alive. I'm not ashamed to say that. It eats everyone alive.
Oh, yeah.
Jim Harbaugh's 2-5 in the rivalry game, and I think Ryan's 1-2. I mean, this stays with you forever. Both these guys are feeling it, and an enormous amount of pressure.
Yeah, and I think that's something about this game is like you don't want to go home a loser, and you never did. And like when I was a player, I never did. Thank God. Like freshman, junior to senior year, I won every game, and that was hard to do. But I couldn't imagine losing that game. As you get closer, I know you're on the road heading north. What is your routine like now? Like as you're getting into the game, I mean, do you study like the night before? I'm sure you've already watched a lot of tape. You take your notes. I jokingly I say you're the Percy Harvin of college football commentators now because I know that you think Percy's the GOAT in college football. What's your routine like now? And I'm sure that you don't miss the unbearable pressure of being the head coach. But do you love what you do now? Because like I think you're the best at it, and it's fantastic watching you do what you do. But what's your routine on a Friday heading up for a big noon kickoff?
I'll tell you, I don't like it. I love it. I love the guys. What makes it so much fun is the people I work with. These
Yeah,
guys are unbelievable. Yeah, we'll have 6 security guys that are like my family members up here. We have
yeah.
Mark Ingram has brought so much to our group. My face hurts every Saturday afternoon afterwards because he makes me laugh so hard. And I'm the old man of the group, but Brady Quinn and Matt Leinart and Mark and Rob Stone they're become family. And our producers and all the directors behind the scenes. Like tonight, we'll have an unbelievable dinner. We'll all hang out. But my routine is Monday is my really, Shelly laughs when I say work day. But I'll put a good 4 or 5 hours of video. We'll go through the rundown. I'll get my positioning on so many things, and then obviously I spend a lot of time on that playbook piece because I want that to be so. I look at and really my position is not the comedian. Mark Ingram and those guys handle that. I like to teach the game, and I've heard that's a lot of reasons why people like our show is it's a combination of a lot of fun, inviting them in to have a beer with us and learn football, and I take that real serious. I want people to educate themselves on this game or us to educate them. So that's my routine, and then Tuesday we clean things up. Thursday we're on the road and headed to where we're headed. Friday is we have rehearsals today. We'll do a taping of a halftime. I think tonight there's a halftime we have to do a taping for. And then Saturday's game day. And I do love it. I miss certain things, but no desire. Living life, man. I really enjoy what I'm doing.
Yeah, like I said, I think that being able to break stuff down the way you do, even with Jerry DiNardo, that's always an outstanding segment. What you do on Fox is always great. But to make it simple so that you can understand it and really teach it, that was something that you were excellent with when I worked with you in 2012, was that you brought in like learning specialists to teach coaches how to teach stuff and how to make it simple and how to make it easy. Because you're not always dealing with some 4.0, 32 on their ACT kid. You got to teach it to those kids. And you had a great saying you always said to us coaches. It always made us feel great that there's no such thing as a dumb player, just dumb coaches. And again, I love that phrase because I always say that to people because I'm like, because I do a lot of film breakdowns on my show. People love it. And I always try to make it so that, people can understand it. Because if you gloss over them, it doesn't work. What has your coaching background brought to what you do now, just in terms of like being, cutting edge with what you do? Because there's a lot of coaches that get into this, but they're not as proficient as you are. And do you think what you do, breaking stuff down, has helped develop guys like Matt Leinart and Brady Quinn? Because like I tell people, I'm like, look, it's one thing to play football, but it's another thing to play football and then coach football. And then it's another thing to coach football for Urban Meyer. Because when you coach football for Urban Meyer, you're in the building at 6 and you leave at 10, and you're on tilt the whole time. Because I tell people it's fun and I loved it because I learned so much. But it's a grind now. But what is kind of what you done helped to develop the rest of the staff on Big Noon Kickoff?
Well, I'll tell you, how about this? The staff we have 2 Heisman Trophy winners, 2 national champions, an All-American at Notre Dame, who, by the way, is brilliant. So we all teach, because I love, the one unique position is quarterback, and Matt Leinart and Brady Quinn are, they're brilliant players. So the perspective of a quarterback has always been so intriguing because they have to, it's the only position, every other position, offense and defense. So they've added so much. Mark Ingram is nothing but energy, juice, plays to the crowd, and we all work off each other. I like to say that, I've basically coached all positions. And even if I didn't coach the O-line, I kind of was a line coach wannabe. I love the line. I love defensive line. So, and then special teams, all those little things probably helped me because I've had my hands in everything. When we do segments and we talk about certain positions, those guys aren't comfortable with what I am. And so I like to throw my, experience around on that. And it's been very helpful, I think.
Yeah, I was always glad you weren't the line coach because I know when I worked for you, our goal is to keep you out of our position room during meetings. So we knew that if you're in our position room, then something was going wrong and we were about to get ripped. So we really worked hard to make sure that the O-line in 2012 was good. I'm going to ask a couple fun questions. So you coached obviously from 12 to 18, had a historic 7-0 run. Is there a game, I imagine like the 18 game where you just ran it up, 62 points. What was your favorite win at Ohio State? I know they're all special, but obviously I feel like the last time you walk off the field at the shoe when you dropped 62 on Michigan, that's got to be up there. Or maybe the first time you beat them in 12, when we weren't real good and we didn't really have it cooking as much as you did kind of in the middle, 14, 15, those years. Was there a favorite win or favorite memories from the game coaching at Ohio State?
I get to reflect a little bit now, and even Shelley said so. We were just watching the documentary last night before I went to bed on Big Ten Network, and you realize how hard it is to win 7 in a row against that team.
Huh.
And I look back now, we had national titles, we had All-Americans, we had Heisman Trophy winners. The fact that you, especially a guy like me that grew up in Northeast Ohio, to think that happened. And I don't know if that'll ever happen again. It's so hard to win that game. But to answer your question, the last one, 18, was the most fun I've ever had to coaching a game. We blocked the punt. We were, Dwayne Haskins, rest his soul, had an incredible day. Our defense, kept the ball rolled up. But the greatest win is the 2016 double overtime, because that was the hardest win.
Yeah.
That was coached against. They had NFL. I heard there's 17 players off that defense went to the NFL, and the way it ended, it was out of body experience. And so it's hard to say one's better than all. And then, you were there in 2012. You're right. We weren't a great team. John Simon, our best player, did not play.
Yeah.
And our offensive line, you were part of that. That group became the best line in the Big Ten. We won the game because of that. We controlled the line of scrimmage, because everywhere else we were just okay. And that win, I remember John Cooper, who became a dear friend, and Earl Bruce even, after the game, says, well, you got number 1 out of the way. And I remember looking at those guys going, wow, you're right. Because you can't get number 2 if you don't get number 1.
Yeah, and I think it builds if you miss on number 1. To get that first one done is huge. And I remember that morning, like those guys were, guys like Norwell and Mewhort, you didn't have to really motivate them that much, especially for a game like that, because they were always gassed up and ready to go. Well, as we get ready to wrap this thing up, what are some plays and some memories? And this is a question I ask people a lot, because I get a lot of people, and obviously, we both hate Michigan, and you don't say Michigan. I do, because I beat them so many times. I just feel like I own them, so I can call them whatever I want. Do you prefer that the team up north is undefeated going into the game, or 0-11 going into the game? Because I'll just give you my quick diatribe. I like when they're good, because I liked beating really good Michigan teams, because I just felt like it meant more than beating like like the Rich Rod 2-9s or whatever. And again, I know that it's way harder, but you just talked about that 16 game and that 18 game when they were either undefeated or one loss or whatever. Like, do you prefer to go beat a great team in the rivalry, or does it matter to you at all?
Of course, it matters, especially now that I'm out of it. I mean, if you face a team that's not very good and you beat them, that's, you're supposed to do that. But when you look across the field and they got the same you have, that's when the coaching, that's when the leadership, that's when that really matters. And so, of course, those are the best wins, is when they were at their best. And they've been at their best the last 2 years, but we also got them twice in the top 5 in the country. And that was 16 and 18. And, you'll always remember the top 5 matchups more than you will. I want to say in 17, they weren't very good. And what was it in the national championship year, 14?
14.
They were just okay. But those other years, they were really good.
Yeah, I agree. I just think, when you look back in the history of your time as a coach and you think about your favorite wins, they're not against 2-9 teams. They're against like the juggernauts. When you win the national championship against Oklahoma, you beat Oregon, win the national championship. When you beat Bama in 14, was the 2014 Alabama game your favorite win at Ohio State?
No, my favorite one was 2016 double overtime team up north. I mean, I think
Wow.
Alabama will go down as one of the great wins. But just the way I was raised, it's always going to be the rivalry game.
I got you. Well, I'm gonna wrap you up with one last question. You know, Ohio has changed dramatically from a high school football perspective. There's still great coaches, great players. I don't know if there's the depth and the top level that there used to be 20 years ago or so. And we used to talk about this though in recruiting where we had to go a little bit more national. Do you think it is tougher now to get kids, when we have a ton of kids from South Florida and Texas and Georgia and California, is it harder to get these kids to truly understand the rivalry as opposed to when you had the kids growing up in Cleveland and Canton and Ashtabula and Columbus and that type of deal? Because my recruiting class was 85-90% Ohio kids. And when we had that really good class in 02, it was 90% Ohio kids. And you literally can't do that anymore. You wouldn't have enough talent to compete at a national level. Do you think that makes Ryan's job a little tougher, that you have to kind of really dig into what this thing means as opposed to, like you grew up in Ohio, Tress grew up in Ohio, Woody grew up in Ohio. Is that tougher?
Oh, it's much more difficult. And, we made the decision in 2012. The Big Ten, if you look back, the Big Ten was not a good conference back in our
Yeah.
first year. The conference was not good. And it was because everybody really tried to population shift. Not all, but a good chunk, majority of NFL players were from certain areas, emphasis and everything. So of course we had to go digging into it, and we did. But that's one of the reasons why we we worked that. That was not a big. I said that earlier. It's not a big game. It's not a big week. It's a way of life, and you have to educate people on that. So that's the Von Bells, Raekwon McMillans. We had to educate Mike Thomas. We had to educate those guys on the rivalry. That's one of the reasons we did the team up north periods once a week during spring practice. Why we constantly educated them. So it's very hard. We had the national championship year. All 5 offensive linemen were from Ohio,
Yep.
and I tried to recreate that. I mean, we tried to recruit Ohio linemen. Because I don't want to say it was easy, but it was easy. You get you get Pat Elfine and Taylor Decker and Corey Lindsley and Jacoby Bryant, Jacoby Boren
Yeah.
and Jack Mehort. Are you kidding me? It's easy to motivate those guys for the rivalry game, but you're getting guys from California, Texas, Florida. That's really hard.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, gonna wrap this thing up, Coach. Again, I really appreciate your time, my man. Again, I always joke, I was like, he retained me, and then he's like, if you stayed in this, you'd be a rock star head coach. And I was like, well, I'm like kind of like how you are now. Like you kind of like your freedom a little bit, and I like to get in my MBA and being in business. It's been great, and I loved coaching, but I get to kind of coach people up on my show every night. And it's been the highest rated show for the last couple months. So, but I appreciate all you did for me. I always tell you that, and appreciate Shells and Nikki and Gigi and Nate. Any final thoughts to the crew that are watching this today?
Yeah, I mean, just all the best to Buckeye Nation. This will be an unprecedented. The anger and this is I'm looking forward to. I'm going to make sure people around me and our team. This is going to be an intense game, man. So.
Yeah.
Everybody say a prayer for the health and safety of our players and go get a dub.
I appreciate you, my man. Thank you so much. That was Urban Meyer. What a great show. Appreciate you guys tuning into that. Again, I'm going to go through these super chats real quick. But yeah, there's Coach Meyer. You guys should jump on BuckeyeScoop.com. We're going to have a full recap of all that. And sorry, I did not see all these super chats. Jared, thank you for the 10, my man. Coach Meyer, I kind of got on that. What would he attack? He talked about the corner with Marvin, some of that. So I appreciate that. Coach Meyer, what's your attack versus the team up north? How do you see it on film that would have made you lick your chops against them? I think it's the corners and the O-line and attacking their tackles. Again, he talked about how poor their tackles were playing. Appreciate you, Jared. I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving. Nick, I appreciate you, my man. I've been a Buckeye. Thank you for the 20. Nick Pristulski. I think I got that right. Appreciate you, my man. I've been a Buckeye fan since I was 8 years old, and I live 40 minutes from the big house. Coach Meyer, thanks for the memories. Appreciate that, my man. Thank you so much. I will relay that to the big dog. Um, uh, Coach, which subordinate taught you the most? I'd bet Earl Bruce. I mean, because that was his guy. So I apologize for not getting that one, Joe Boo, but I bet it was Earl. That was the guy that was constantly around the building, a guy that he worked for at Colorado State. Um, you know, so yeah. Um, David Paterick, thanks for the 20, my man. I appreciate you, brother. You're the best, as always. Happy Thanksgiving to you and Janet, as always. Pavlos, thank you, brother. Thanks for the 5. Go Bucks. Thank you, Coach, for everything you've done for Ohio and the great state of Ohio. I will relay that as well. So thank you, guys. I appreciate that. Scheffler Healthcare, again. Coach, what would you say is the big difference between your coaching style and Coach Jay's coaching style? Thanks for memory. So I apologize for not getting this in when he was on. Obviously, I think that the tenacity and the offensive scheme are the two biggest differences. I study with Coach. He'll be back on soon. So any of you guys that I missed, just make sure send him again, and I'll make sure I do a Q&A with him. He's the audio was kind of a little up and down because he's literally driving from Columbus to Ann Arbor right now. So he had a couple dead zones, but again, it was a fantastic show. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I had a blast doing it. Again, I appreciate you guys so much for tuning in and kicking it with us. So things to do. We have Buckeye Scoop Ultra, which is launched, and we've got a bunch of members now. So we appreciate all you guys joining that. If you guys do not belong to BuckeyeScoop.com, it is an absolute war zone on there right now. It's incredible how awesome it is. The amount of content that we're pushing, the amount of interaction between people, the game thread is on fire. So we appreciate you guys that are all members of BuckeyeScoop.com. If you guys are looking for a sweet Black Friday gift, BuckeyeScoop.com is the gift for you. To yourself or any huge Ohio State fan, it's life-changing if you love Ohio State football. So I appreciate you guys doing that. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please leave us a like, click subscribe, and also click the little alert bell. Again, we appreciate you guys taking care of us and hooking us up as always. So again, this was a fantastic episode. I'm going to get ready to edit it and post it. And I will be back later tonight with Nevada Buck. He is in transit, so we will be ready to rock and roll. But I appreciate you guys so much. We are one sleep away from the Michigan game. We're going to have full coverage on BuckeyeScoop.com. And again, we appreciate all you guys do for us, and we appreciate you guys kicking with us. That being said, go Bucks.